next episode is up for a new time here on the Mega AI Unplugged. Today I have a great visitor from Daniel Pearce from Telsolutions, and a big welcome to you, Daniel.
Thanks very much.
Daniel, you and me, we have been talking together with your team for the last many months, and we are going into some collaboration together.
Right.
I'm looking forward to sharing more of that, not today, but another day. But I can tell you that Telsolution and Mega has been working on something unique, amazing, that we will give you some more insight as we go. But Daniel, today is not about that. It's more about you, because I like to come close to industry leader who have thought leaders who have been also in the industry we are serving for many years, and try to share some experience and good knowledge around the last previous 30 years in your career. So Daniel, for the viewers who don't know who you are, can you give us a little insight on that?
Sure. Yeah. So originally I came into the industry back in the early 90s, doing customer engagement messaging, and started off in those days, the only tools sort of common internet. So it was all fax broadcasting and telex. But then we saw the emergence of email as an engagement channel and SMS messaging. So as the technology evolved on, so did really my career in focusing just purely on that customer engagement as each channel came in. And that, of course, has progressed into, back in 2019, we started pushing chatbots into our existing clients, and then starting to replace them with virtual assistants. But on the voice side of using voice messaging has been around again, sort of 25 years, going back to the early days of a pre-recorded message for the investment banks pushed out to investors. So I was very much at the start of that, and then pushed it out. And so predominantly nowadays I work in debt recovery and enforcement. They're the two areas, but historically I was in all sorts of interesting industries, mainly like banking and investment banking at the time. But nowadays everything's all about debt and customer engagement and support.
Yeah. It's funny. So you grew up like the same as I did in my call center industry, where we started up with a simple phone, I think actually on the table, and then moved to something called a dialer, and that whole journey is very interesting to be a part of that evolution to where we are today.
That's right. It's changed considerably over the years, but I feel in the last few years the technology has been accelerating. In terms of just only a few years ago, chatbots were the big new thing. Already, I think they're starting to become defunct as the technology moves to more of a voice interface.
Yeah. I think there is a need where you see the situation in the whole landscape. I think that's also what it comes down to now. We work a lot in the collection space, of course. There was a landscape also that looks like something just a year ago, or 2 years ago, or 3 years ago to today, where we talk a lot about vulnerability. It's not a UK thing where you sit and where I have a lot of customers. It's a global thing. It's also happening in my country, in Denmark. Right. So how do you communicate? Where do you communicate? What kind of channels? And one is not enough. And also the method of how should you communicate to a certain segment of people to be in touch with them. And we can see that, of course, that will just be going on and on from now on as the younger generation coming up. My daughter, she's 21. She communicates on 7 different online channels, I think. So the need for that is rising, of course, also. Yeah. So Daniel, you are part and you merge behavioral science and tech to improve outcomes. What have sparked, this integration, and how does it actually work in practice?
So originally, messaging that would go out to the customers was pretty rudimentary. It would just tell the customer, because most of it was paper-based, sending out a letter to a customer.
Yeah.
And although the letters that were being posted to the customers, they had a standard format. There was a bit of behavioral science in it, putting a bit of a red ring around it, or red box around something, a bit grayscaling. There was limited, a bit like in the days of fax, there was very limited to what you could actually do to the communications. to actually get them to be more effective. But as digital has moved on, we can learn so much more about the customer journey by looking at what the customers tracked on, what they didn't track on, so it tells you about something about them, and then we can use that to reach a better outcome. The other aspect was that traditional communications, a lot of it's out of your control. Even a contact center, they've got finite resources, calling at a set time of the day. But actually what we learned with debt recovery was that customers are trying to get information and support out of hours. And that's really where we found the AI could really start helping customers, particularly at the out of hours. But we could only learn that through sort of using techniques that were reporting and telling us what's going on, so we could then pick the right channel, the best time of day to be effective, and then using a lot of the traditional behavioral science techniques. And that included that with lettering, the traditional way of contacting the customer, there was a cost involved.
Yeah.
And that cost means that the more you spend on recovering something, the smaller the return, or that you've got limited amounts of money that you can put in to get a single return. So with digital, cost point is far, far lower. So using behavioral science, we could go back to having multiple contacts with the customer, giving them as many different options as you just said there, Martin, that your daughter has 5, 6, 7 different chat tools, giving the customer all of that range of choice. It gives them no excuse to back out. You're giving them all the options. They can pick the one they prefer. So I feel that's the behavioral science side of it is you can do so much more now with digital than you could ever do even sort of 10 years ago. The landscape's completely changed.
I agree, and customer profiling in general have nothing. There's nothing new about that. It's just easier now, and especially when you are in the landscape we are now, to understand clients. One thing is how they behave, what channel they would love to, but another thing is what is the message you want to send to them. And with the knowledge you have available in the market today, and can also enrich your data with, you can know a lot more and then communicate proper on the right channel with the right message, with the right, maybe in my world where we talk about AI, just the right personalities also, to match that customer profile in the end. So most people think automation, I hear that all the time, is about cutting costs. That's when we talk about AI, some of the things, how can I use it to cut down my cost? And that's of course one thing, but you made it also about improving results. And that's what is the mind shift you think operators should or must embrace? You can say not only that this is about cutting down in cost, but a lot more about improving the results that they are here to do, of course.
Yeah. So certain debt types into that type of engagement has an economic value, and below that economic value, they don't bother chasing it. But at times when there's only so many people you can cut out of a business, there's only so much cost you can cut out of it. At some point, you're going to have a look at the process you use to try and improve it, because you just won't be able to squeeze any more out of it. And that leads you to start looking at the processes in total and to try and introduce things that make those incremental changes. And some of them are very small, but we have learned that, particularly when it comes to sort of recoveries, that we're writing to a customer, we ask them 3-4 times, then we push them on to the next stage in the process. The one thing about traditional sort of customer engagement, it was process driven, but it was done on bulk. And when something's done on bulk, you can't really change it in real time. And what sort of the voice interface is to do is it was previously one shoe fits all. You either got the letter, got the text message, got the voice message. None of it was interactive and conversational.
Yeah.
Now with the technology where it is, it can start to become conversational, and that's going to give a significant, or it already does, it gives a significant difference in the results when customers, rather than just saying yes or no, can now get the answers they want, and that's conversational change, and that moves up the results by more than just a fraction of a point, moves it up by a fair few percent.
Yeah, I say the same. to my clients. It's not about necessarily thinking cutting costs down as a part of it, but again, you say it's about understanding, and by that give a better experience, and by those results converting
Yeah,
better, connecting better with clients, and then there are so many long side effect of it also. I talk a lot about in the utility sector these days, as you and me have talked about
yeah,
vulnerability and PSR, and some of them are saying, yeah, but it's that difficult and it's hard and we don't want to do it actually, but we need to do it, etc. And said, and there's no money. There was some guy said in vulnerability, and I said there's a lot of money to be made in vulnerability and understanding your
yeah. That's
clients'
right.
needs based on it, because they
Correct,
become loyal customers. And what is a loyal customer worth to you? Because you communicate correctly with the correct
correct.
presence, knowledge, etc., etc. So I think that's a very that
So
is
if
the
I
mind
if
shift that they need to do.
so, just looking back at to 2014, so just over 10 years ago, I recall that the DCAs, the debt collection agencies in the UK, they were asked, I think, by the FCA at the time to start surveying people to check the outcomes of telephone calls to see whether the result, and they didn't want to do it because they felt that all they was going to get is negative feedback from the end customer to say, even if they had a good experience with the member of staff on the phone, they were only going to get bad feedback. And there was a lot of reluctance by our clients to actually do this, and
Yeah,
they didn't really want to do it, and they wanted to cherry pick. What they actually found was that because staff then were aware of this, the outcome for the customer was far better. The member of staff got good feedback, so it made them feel better.
yeah,
But the main thing was they were able to start learning from the customer, the learning from that feedback. So I agree with you completely that vulnerability and understanding of customer should be highly valued and not be a tick box exercise to say
precisely.
we've just done it, so we've got some results.
Yeah.
It's more than that. It will actually lead to far better outcomes.
Yeah. And it's funny with all that, it's not funny, but with all the collection agencies, we talk a lot about it in general. When you collect money, how do you want? There was a talk with with another partner this morning. He said, yeah, they come still with like a vest where you can stab, and there's a body cam on and black clothes, and they're knocking on the doors, and they still that narrative of aggressiveness or not salute. There's no proper solution in. It's just pushing people. And I always say, I will bet you you will have a lot more conversion rate and connecting with clients, and
Yeah,
make them actually pay the bills if you approach them where they are in their life. So I think that's very interesting, and
yeah.
also come down to a lot of the essence of our talk. But you work in a special segment, Daniel. I work in a very commercial segment, and you of course also do that. But when you are designing services for local government, how do you balance like simplicity for the user with the complexity of the backend, and how do you now like take people in that circle, especially in your segment that you are working in?
Okay, so when we started moving away from the private sector, probably around about 2014, and we started predominantly going into local government, and there is a different approach. First of all, they're not in competition with each other. So in private sector, everybody wants to have a little bit of an edge. Local government are risk adverse. They are not going to change things quickly, um, and they're not necessarily so commercially driven. So they're not going. It's not all about chasing some KPIs and some income levels for the month. They do, of course, have targets to do that. But what we found, what we had to do was first to tell them that we're going to help them level the playing field. So their technology was years out of date. They didn't have ways of engaging in the same way as the private sector, and they weren't really that interested in trying to understand the customer at all. They just felt the customer's got a taxation arrears, they need to go and pay it. And if they don't, we'll send the enforcement agents in.
Yeah,
So we had to, one, make the technology, we had to simplify it. They're not interested in contact center services. They just didn't really understand it. So it had to be simple to do. It had to be shown to be empathetic to the customer. They were very sensitive to that because bearing in mind that if they local government, they work for political masters in each local area. And
yeah,
those political masters have different agendas depending on the area, and they represent their communities. So as much as they need the income, they've got to do that. So all the services we put in have to be sort of quite sensitive to that. But we did have to simplify them in a way that made it affordable, but it was a way that we could step it up over time once the trust was given there, that one the way we could learn.
Yeah.
But local government, turns out, is extremely hard to get into, but it's the main point is once you're in there is they work together, they understand that, but they are not, it's not all about money, it is all about the local political scene.
A wider goal.
It is a wider goal is about reaching better outcomes for both parties, better outcome for the customer, better outcome for the local government. And as a result, they do get some exceptionally high delivery results and payment results. But that also means we have to dovetail into local government is very aligned to enforcement. And enforcement has come under a lot of scrutiny, a lot of regulation and legislation, and that industry is completely changed. And now there's the ECB. So all of that fits in very nicely. And in fact, if you look at enforcement, that old tarnished image of someone banging on your door, it's very much changed. In many cases, enforcement of agents are more like social workers now. They have to again build, but they need the information that comes from digital to enable them to do that.
Yeah, I actually saw a telly here and the other day in a documentary from UK where that was the case now. Social workers going out knocking on the doors, again with the mindset of trying to go from a negative experience to a helpful, a supportive experience, which I think will be anyway a good return of investment for the government scene also.
Right.
So you were involved in one of the first AI chat service in local government. What was the business case precisely, and how did you get like a buy-in from that swift in the decision makers around that first experience you did?
Okay, so we originally started, so we had existing relationships with 100 at the time about 140 local authorities. So we had existing relationships. They were using us for the contacting of customers through types of text messages, email, voice messaging. But then we had that existing framework to put it on. What we then did was we looked at putting in chat services and chatbots, and that was done sort of from 2019. Those early chatbots gave us a good feel for what people really want, but the requirements for those technologies were quite different from what they actually thought they really wanted to. We had to learn very early on that where they would draw a map, say it's got to do this, got to do that. What we actually found was when we looked at the data, it was quite different from what was actually the customers actually really wanted to do. When the sort of generative AI came around in the last few years, again, we found a couple of authorities that are less risk adverse, that are willing to try it, and that others will sit and watch them do it and will share the information. And we are lucky in that sense that they're not in such a competitive environment. So the business case really was, would they want to try something? And we picked on debt advice and support as an initial way of using Gen AI. And the reason why we decided to pick on that was because it seemed less complex. We could give it information, documents that it could help the customer, and we could take them from reference documents. So we essentially said, would you like to try this? It was going to be a big risk for them, a big risk for us, but because they'd known us for 10 years, they'd then done the chatbot, it was the logical step onwards. So we gave them a virtual assistant, which was just purely based on debt advice and support, and we put it in. We then tested it for about a month. Actually, it was sort of tested by the client before we put it into a live environment. So the turnaround start to finish was pretty much 8 weeks. There was nothing really in it. But what we found was it was effective instantly, because it was just, we'd put the right documents in it for it to learn. The next logical step for them is to look at the voice assistants and voice bots. That'll be just take them for the outbound calling. But we were lucky there, and since then that sparked a huge amount of interest from other local authorities
Yeah.
And by the way, they've got to make massive savings. They're in no
Yeah.
keen
Yeah, of course,
state
also
financially
got the fact.
themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. But it also
And so
comes
it's
down
worked out
to
very well.
it also comes down, so I can hear like a long relationship, a lot of knowledge already around the project, the customer, and that leads into these
Yeah.
projects are also more easy to get
Yeah.
successfully ahead with if you have that long relationship with a client where you have been building different kind of new optimizations together for them.
I would say one thing to add to that, Martin, is there's, of course, there are many people who have had bad experiences.
Yeah, that was my
And
next
if I went
question,
back to the,
actually. That was
yeah,
some of my next
so,
question about bad experiences.
yeah,
One thing that you and me have probably more or less every day. Or
yeah,
I have bad experience, not with, but when I
yeah,
in society in general when I use it. But you actually said,
yeah.
and maybe that comes down to what you were about to say. You actually said that many AI projects fail because they start too big. Can you try to unpack that with an example, and maybe that leads down to what you were
Yeah,
about to
yeah.
say something about?
Okay, so when I looked at this, we came in it as a business that had just taken on the chat service to go to the rest of our suite of
Yeah,
products. But there was already some companies had gone in and done vast corporate approaches. But
yeah,
that was huge risk. But they went in at a level, big investment, looks lovely, and so those suppliers probably thought this is fantastic. However, the scope of those projects with the complexity of all the different stakeholders from different areas of the business wanting access to it, most of those projects failed. And in fact, I've rarely seen one that's actually ever worked. We came in with very limited resources. I couldn't expose us to that kind of failure. So I tackled one area of local government first, just one
yes.
area of each local council, so we could get it right. One, it was easier for us, and two, for the client to trust it. But there was also, when I was presenting the next AI, when local government first started looking at this in 2019, most officers had no idea. Most people don't. They don't understand how it actually works.
Yeah.
But what they would all say is, and it's difficult when you're presenting in a room, they would all say, oh, I went onto some travel website. It was terrible. Didn't know what it was doing. I was going round and round in circles. That bad experience was quite infectious.
Yeah.
So those poor experience, those early chatbots,
Yeah.
put people off. So I had an obstacle to get over. And then when we were looking at the generative AI, people were opening up the papers saying how clever it was, but at the same time, the scary stories about some chat engine swearing at someone or something like that. So it put the fear of God into people, that they thought this technology is too underdeveloped. So why don't we just leave it for a few years? Those bad experiences hindered us in many respects. But I think the way we solved it was to try and keep it simple
Yeah.
in one, for
Yeah.
one area, get that team working correctly, allow the other stakeholders to view it before we could push on with the technology into a wider scope and then bring in all the bells and whistles and all the fancy stuff.
I think it's a really, really important thing for the audience, so you who listen to this, to take away. I say the same to all my clients. I say, can we just go big, and can we then cut down, and can we take a full, like from start to end, and saying, yes, it will be able, but let's start here. Let's start small. Let's start with small, solving one solution, one problem at the time. The most where it's most impactful for your humans time, whereas
Yeah,
doesn't matter a lot towards your clients. Like, what is the first part of experience? Let's get that part right. Let's take the next little bit, and this is how you should go. People say also, oh, I'm behind 20% of my outbound call. Yeah, but I will not be the one who fix it for the next 30 days, because
yeah,
it's not a sprint. It's a marathon. You need to start the right place. You
yeah,
need to go that process. There is no quick fix and easy way of doing it. You should be starting now, but there's no quick fix. So start. So I think that's a very good advice. What are the worst assumption teams make when adopting AI, and especially in regulated or slow-moving sectors, like you can say, without defending anybody, that the
Um,
government is in that
so,
sector?
so I think some of the worst assumptions is that they've they've they they look at it from the advice from the ICT department
Yeah,
who aren't doing the job.
yeah,
They need to look at it from their own operational side of what it can do in small bits to help their work today,
yeah.
whereas ICT look at a very holistic view of it solving the problems for the entire business. And for me, time and time and time again, we see that failing rather than that. And the assumption is that it needs to be a big project, it needs to have ICT involved. And for 20 years of doing local government, that we've been involved in local government, is the first thing it says, I need to involve ICT. You don't. This technology can be run by you. You design it. It runs by you because you're the people that know. It doesn't need ICT. It doesn't need to do integrations, not initially, but this can be very light touch and be really effective. But that worst assumption is this is a technical solution. This needs ICT. It really doesn't at all.
It's a blocker. That is a blocker for the whole project in
Yeah,
general in those
yeah, that's
sectors.
true.
Potential without putting things and people in a box. If you had to
Sure.
relaunch that AI chatbot project that was the first like big one in there, what would you do differently with the knowledge you know today and with the experience you had from that time, if you wanted to do anything differently?
I think we would, at a risk of looking foolish, we were not brave enough. We
Okay.
probably should have been a bit braver.
Yeah.
Um, we also didn't have the only case examples when we got hold of the platform were for completely different industries, so they weren't really a great deal of use to us. But we grabbed the opportunity. I think we should have been a bit braver, and certainly because we did it in a shared knowledge environment between that authority and some others,
Yeah.
we should have invited the others to come along at a risk, or maybe telling them that this is really cutting edge and this is likely to go wrong. As it happens, it didn't go wrong and nothing went wrong. But we 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 should have been probably a little bit braver had I done it. And I think we should have, once it was launched, we should have jumped on it. We did go for an award with it, and we got through to the finals. It's bigger awards. It's not down to having the best thing to win. It's not that. It's the institute, so it's
Yeah.
slightly different on
Yeah.
judging. But I think we should have been a little bit braver and brought in other people to have a look at it. I think we would have pushed on a lot further with this technology then.
So that's also a good advice. And I think in general, it's today's space. I just posted a LinkedIn post this morning and saying, if you are a CEO and you are not putting it in now, go all in on all your departments. You are going to be left behind very, very soon. So I think that now to be bold, we could have one attitude at that time. Maybe today is about when you get something, you move fast with it, go out there, embrace it, put it in, and try to be bold also. And as you said, a good thing,
Yeah.
involve your customer. This is cutting new edge technology. It will go wrong. It has a big potential of go wrong, but if you do it controlled and small and testing, we can control this new area. So I think that's also a good.
If I could just
Yes, please.
add something to that, it was when we knew that there was going to be some risks that this AI could run away and give people completely the wrong advice. So I didn't want to hide that from the
Yeah.
people. We were presented to crowds of people at a time for lots and lots of authorities. So I actually built it in to address those points head on, knowing that if I didn't, the audience would be whispering amongst themselves, here's the risks,
I
here's the
love it.
risks, without actually knowing
Yeah.
what it is. So we did address the things of people in our case saying they were could be suicidal. What do you do then? The AI should not be advising people. It needs to go through to someone who's trained in it. But by explaining how that works, that actually diffused a lot of the
Yeah.
objections, really did head on, and
Yeah.
that helped people go,
Yeah.
okay, so there is some risk, but they're being upfront about the risks. As long as we know them, let's give this a try. Let's give this
Yes.
technology a try.
Yeah, I think that's the core of in general, but it's a core of also like a mindset in general when you're selling things like this, and especially new technology. Take the customer with you on that journey. It's a journey together, and be transparent upfront about everything around this new technology that is so efficient, but there is no black and white. It's not just fantastic. There is downsides and etc. also.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
like you are sitting in a position in Telsolution, you've been on the market for a long time, you talk with customers. What does it really take to sell into public sector customers where you can say they just in general is what everybody say, Martin, stay away from that sector, it moves so slow, etc. What does it take beside patient and but there's a special profile, there is like some special things that you need to have into consideration when you sell to public sector. Can you try to give some?
Yeah, I think to sell into public sector, you've particularly that we had a conference earlier this year that you attended to, and everybody thinks it's the golden goose. It's just going to keep on laying this incredible revenue, and that it's going to be dead simple. It's not. It does take time and patience, but also they're highly risk adverse, so they're not going to jump at the first thing they see. But it is about building relationships with them, and they do need reference sites. So within the last 10 days, one of our clients, existing users for main services, has reported that they invited in a supplier who said, yeah, they work for lots of local authorities. They need to remember the local government is a community, and they've been caught with their pants down. They've told one authority they've got lots of business. It hasn't worked out on the trial. The AI's failed, and it's just a chatbot. It has failed. It's not as functioning as said unseen, and that they accidentally let slip. No, they were the first draft
It's
site,
very
and that doesn't help.
no, it's
You've
very
got to be
interesting.
honest with them.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's very interesting because you're a small environment. I'm not sure we're talking about the same customer, but
Yeah,
I had the same experience 2 weeks ago where we are well because we are onboarding into a huge DCA in UK that works for the government. We are through that government process, and I had the same. I heard the same. Somebody said that these people already were there and worked with them, etc. And it turned out that there wasn't. There were nobody else through that
yeah,
process, and I think so. That's one of the
for
things.
local government, yeah,
The trust and transparency, etc., is a very small industry. So one thing is to behave correct and remember that you are in a small community of people that talks together. So that whole like extra
yeah,
service layer that you will normally have here, you actually need to think wider. And it's a little bit the same in the collection space and industry. You should think that they are not talking together because that they are competitors, but they do, and they talk a lot
they
together.
do.
So
Yeah,
that's one thing. And
yeah,
then, as you said,
absolutely.
relationship building over time. I'm normally trying also to pitch in and saying, this is not about me selling anything tomorrow. Maybe it's about going into some beta projects, some proof of concept projects, some let's do something together. Let's analyze your biggest problem and see if we could be a part of solving with some kind of, so that, and that can take time. So that's also what you are saying. It takes time. It needs to build relationship building based on that,
Yeah,
and be very transparent and honest in your process is a good advice.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Um, so how do you personally, in your situation where you sit there, how do you keep the momentum going when you have that, like your commercial momentum that Telsolution is a business that needs to grow, and how do you keep that momentum going when you know have been in these type of sales cycles for many years? Is that difficult based on other previous backgrounds?
Yeah, so local government's about to go through a massive reorganisation over the next 3 years. So many local authorities, if you looked at the traditional map of the UK, are going to disappear. There's going to be various tranches of that happening. So at the moment, we're picking up an acceleration on new business, and that is being driven by two factors. Is this lumbering sort of LGR, local government reorganisation, coming down the road that's pushing it.
Yeah.
And two, that local government has to do more with less. They're not getting the money that they were during COVID. They've got to stand on their own 2 feet and balance the books. And they've not been balancing the books, to be fair, for a number of years. So they've got to look at ways of doing things. So AI, the government's told them, look at AI. So there's a directive there. It's very well the central government having a directive. How local government interprets that is quite different, because a lot of local government is run by officers who have been there 30, 40 years,
Yeah.
and you need them to understand what's going on, and the process they have in place. It's actually, they're very well heavily legislated, so they can't just do whatever they want.
Yeah.
They've got a set process they have to work, a framework they have to work around. So we've kept up the momentum ourselves through doing a lot of speaking appointment events. And again, a lot of it is all show and tell, takes time, but we're also very active regionally. But that's now paying big dividends for us, that we've got this extremely good pipeline of business that's coming in from authorities there that we hadn't previously worked in, and that's helped. But it's just like a sausage machine. We've had to charge it up, keep it going, but now it's paying dividends. But
But you can also
it
say
will not be.
it's a good point you have there, because with these 10 years, like this long relationship building, introducing
Yeah,
new product, there's a legalization now. It become more and more normal now to look at this. There's
yeah,
there's other budgets they need to look at it. Anyway, this is the only way potential for some of them to cut down
yeah,
in cost and raise efficiency. And because you have done this, and because you're doing all these things and are present and are there and had that patience for years, and are not only talking about the product, but deeply understand the client's world, where they are coming from, speaking their languages, is also what now will, as I see it, open a complete big new business area. As you also can feel a little
yeah.
bit now, that you will probably be the supplier that they will choose to, ramp something like this out, because
Correct.
they have that
Yeah,
relationship with you. So
yeah.
instead of a
That's right.
guy like me coming from Denmark, we had a huge team. We created a crazy great product, like so strict compliant, but we don't have that relationship. But together with you,
Yeah,
this is actually where our partnership becomes to grow, because
that's right.
we can support each other with each other's knowledge and also insight in the market. So to the audience
That's
out
right.
there, what is the lessons about building tech services, or what have you done that 31 years now, that you would wish that
That's
every
right.
founder have understood? What lesson could that be, with your experience, to anybody building a company in the tech space right now?
Um, I think that people have great ideas, and there's some amazing technology out there. I mean, you look at every day on sort of, YouTube, whatever. There's various adverts for this AI and that AI, and there's, this will fix your business, this will fix all your inbox. All of that sounds great, but there are, you, I think that means that often that AI walks into these beautiful looking offices with lots of smiley people walking around, and it all looks lovely. However, the majority of companies work out of normal looking offices. Some of their equipment's real legacy, and it's not as easy as plug and play. And plug and play was never really worked. When Windows brought that out, it didn't really work at all. But it's so, I think what we've found is the lesson is that actually having something that appears to do everything, probably it looks too good to be true, and therefore people are a bit skeptic. What we've found, that the lesson we've learned, is that actually it doesn't need to be that clever, that actually having something that is fundamentally can be shown to be effective. And a lot of those AI projects that we've seen that have failed is because they promised everything, but they failed to deliver, some of the basic things. And that it very flashy in its presentation, flashy on its PowerPoint, but actually they had failed to understand the core business, failed to understand actually what people really need and do on a day-to-day basis, their function day-to-day,
Yes.
and trying to get the technology and bend the technology to fix that
Yeah.
problem,
Yeah.
rather than walking in and saying, everything you've been doing for years is rubbish. We've got the fix for everything, which is why when you watch Instagram and YouTube, they claim that.
I love that statement. I really love that statement, and I think we saw it. I can remember when we began building 1.5 years ago, and we built the first version, and it didn't work. Yeah, it worked. It worked actually really well, but it was not for scaling because, as you also mentioned before, in 1 to 2% of it, it actually said something that was not super nice. That is said. So we needed to build a product that solved the problem. There were no false positive rooms in our space, so we needed to do that. Now we can guarantee that it will never say anything, but that was to solve a real problem. So it could be really fancy, and I can see there was 20 AI companies coming up, and now it can do, and they can talk with these voices and say, yeah, but it doesn't really work in real life because it was not created to understand that problem that it needs to fix, and the variations and the complexity of that problems that it's here to fix. So I think you're really right. It can be very flashy. Try to solve a problem, fix it very well. And you said something out. No, I'm not coming here and I can rebuild everything and we can do it with this one size fit and
Yeah.
boom, easy fix. It is not existing. So I think that, and you talked about efficiencies also. Let me take that word and frame it a little bit down to what you have been working with. So you've been doing scale across text, voices, emails. Which of those channels have surprised you most in terms of efficiency? And why do you think that that was your learning? If you take that out to what and how did you come to that conclusion?
So we tend to find voice is still the most powerful. Now we have some really fancy types of messaging, SMS web forms, and the new standard RCS. Email's really the most direct. It can only go to your mailbox, whereas text message, you get the wrong mobile number, you don't know where that ends up. But the voice, still from the first time I ever saw that back in voice messaging back in 2000, 2001, whatever it was, when I first saw that technology, it's because you can put into the voice messaging the sense of urgency.
Yeah.
You can relay emotion within the message. And so it was such a powerful tool. And in those days, it was being used just by the banks to make outbound calls, to leave messages on people's answer machines. In fact, before that, it was part of sort of catalog businesses to get people to sell things. But the way that the voice is emotive and can do that, and people will pick up and listen to it, and they will react to it far more powerfully than they will do just necessarily via text. However, we tend to find the most success is to blend all of these technologies together, which is very hard to do. In fact, we're one of the few businesses that do that, but I tend to find a voice is still extremely powerful to get someone to maybe sit up and read the messages that maybe follow it or take action.
I agree, and I think the more digital we become, I think there will always be that I walk down the shopping street in my city, and we talked with my mother-in-law the other day. They are just dying all the shops here, and I said, "Yeah, where do your wife buys her clothes?" And I said, "Yeah, you're right. It's like online. All these packages are dumping into my mail door every day, so that's where they're coming from." But the more we get digitalized, the more there's still a need for a voice, if that's an AI voice or another type of voice. But I think you're right. But you said something that is the key for success. One channel is not enough. This is an omni-channel strategy. You need to adapt it, as we talked about in the beginning of this episode, that ages, background, where you come from, how you think, how you work, what your income level is, whatever that is, it all leads down to communicate in different kind of channels. So let's talk some career here in the soon end of this episode. Let's talk some career legacy. What are you most proud of building or being a part of building in Telsolution? And what is the next big thing on your radar as you go in here to the next 6 months or third quarter
I,
of 25?
I think that in terms of that, it was the putting together some services, combining them to something unique. Now you can send a text message, but they never worked in harmony with a voice message. That just didn't have and based around someone's behavior. So that was taking earlier learnings from simpler services that were all siloed, were all independent, and putting them all together into a strategy, and then testing that and seeing that, and then replicating that across the industry to having it that the strategy name has become synonymous within the industry for, it's become like a trade name really in for what it does. So that was really impressive. I think for me that the next step is, if you I saw something recently. It showed all these sort of early computer geeks and those that work for all the big companies that sort of developed all this technology in the early days, that worked for Apple, etc. They were all watching Star Trek and Star Wars back in the 60s and 70s, whatever. And that technology, and then with all the other sort of science fiction programs, the technology in all cases, even some of the things like you saw tablets, and they were shown on Star Trek. The future appears to be this voice activated. So we've already got voice like Siri and Google Dot, etc. But the future for me, really, where I'm really excited, is the ability for a system not only to make an outbound call, but to analyze it in real time and to work through a problem with someone. Because that's really, if you look at the technology that you saw in all those science fiction films, it was, the captain on the bridge calling out to the computer to plot a route or something like that. So really, it's to move away, as someone said, I watched on something else, to move away, to free yourself from the keyboard, and that you will be able to ask questions and free yourself from the keyboard, and that includes the keyboard on your phone, to an interactive voice messaging. And that technology has been fairly shonky for years, but now the technology is matured enough to be really effective. So for us, I feel that's the next step. The capability's there, the technology's there. We just need to get those applications into local government and get them using it as well.
It's amazing to see how it has been developing. I started in this space 1.5 years ago. That was one generation. Today, no latency. It responds so fast. It's such a great conversation. I asked my head of AI, who come from Carnegie Mellon University in US, that is like the place where AI was born. And we talked a lot about what is the next step coming after the summer. Like we're talking about August, September, October, like not a long way from now, a couple of months. And it was because one client asked you, would you be able to detect emotions very fast? And I asked Dr. Anders Øland, our head of AI, and he said, Martin, in just a couple of months after the summer, it will be able to spot if you have Parkinson disease under the conversation of a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
And based on that information, take the conversation a different road. Vulnerability already, no problem. We can see it now. It spots it. It can talk about it, have empathy, sympathy. So you're right. Being able, so it brings so many great things, both in our type of product, but also, as you said, the freedom for us who works every day. That was also my LinkedIn post this morning. You cannot, as a CEO, allow yourself to not educate your team, to give them those tools, to give them that knowledge to work with, because it's happening so fast and they will get left behind and they don't deserve it. AI is not here to replace people or companies, but it's here to replace people and companies that don't embrace it, because that will then happen, I think. So on the last 60 seconds, a few good words to it has been very, very interesting, Daniel. I love your perspective, your knowledge around it, and I think that there are great things ahead for both you and your company. If you should give the audience now, we're coming into summer holiday now. People are going off for some week. Hopefully, one book that you would always recommend out there, what could that be? One good book, if you read.
That was such a difficult question to ask. So it wouldn't be one of those on the bookshelf. I don't think it'd be one of those, but I tend to read. I tend to read a lot of history books
Yeah.
because you in a history book you read about successes and failures, but actually you can interpret many of the mistakes that were made, and you can interpret them. And I tend to find that a lot of the history books that I read, you can interpret them in a modern day way and to avoid those same pitfalls. And I've managed to do that a few times. In fact, I've managed to use quite a few famous lines in presentations without anybody noticing. But so I wouldn't say the books I read are the most interesting for people to take on holiday, and they'll probably soon be chucking them in the nearest bin on the holiday resort. But there we go.
That's a good one. Most overrated buzzword in tech industry. What's that?
Yeah. Synergy. I just never understood it in the first place. I didn't really get it, and just buzzwords like synergy and yeah, I just there's loads. I've been kicking around for years that have meaningless to the audience who buy services. Waste of time. Needs to be people need to speak in plain language to people who are buying this stuff
I
in
love
their
it.
plain language rather than using fancy lines that
I,
don't work.
I, I simply love that, and it happens all the time. And I think that's a very good recommendation. Most underrated skill in commercial operation.
Most underrated skill in collaboration.
Yeah, commercial
Oh God, where are you
operation.
getting these questions from? That's really difficult. Um, I think the a lot of partnerships and collaboration tends to fail where you don't really share the true objectives of what you're trying to achieve, and that a lot of partnership deals are signed but never go anywhere and fail because actually no one's got any time to put into them. You're going to have to invest with that partner, and of course the risk is you waste your time, but you're going to have to put time into that partner to get a result. If not, it's just going to be a complete failure.
That's an amazing advice out there. I say it to all people who
Yeah,
want to partner with us. I rather not if we don't go all in together, because it's just a signature on a paper and nothing will come out of it. And real good
yeah.
partnership, you need to invest in them, both sides, and grow together. Super, super recommendation. Last question here on the last minute of this one here. One prediction for governance tech or collection in the next 5 years that you think will happen? One
I
prediction.
think, yeah, I think unless for those authorities that don't adopt AI, they're dead. They're going to fall. They already should be seeing start falling numbers in their recovery rates. They're not recognizing, some authorities are just not recognizing and are sticking their heads in the sand. They're not recognizing that the public's behavior on how they buy services, trade services, what they'll react to is changed, and it's changed significantly in the last few years. And if they don't start adopting, if they're just chasing their pension because they've done 40 years at the council, they're going to leave that authority in a mess, and they have to look at adopting. So in the next 5 years, I think AI will be a lot of the data profiling that we didn't talk about today. A lot of that will be done to ensure that the customer is approached in the best possible way, has the best support to reach that outcome, to get that arrangement, to get that debt cleared, so it doesn't have to follow on to another process or to an EA in some cases.
That was a super advice. You will be left behind if you then don't get moving now. It is on all layers and levels. It doesn't matter if you are private commercial company, if you are government, you need to get going. The speed of this is not
Yeah,
like you are used to, as I normally say. Daniel Pearce, it was a great pleasure to have you. Super insights. I really appreciate it. I'm sure the audience will
no
too.
problem at all. Thank
And
you.
we will keep in touch. And next time I will meet Daniel here, we will have some more exciting news.